as we go live.
Sun Ra Orchestra.
Nice.
Prodding some learning here today. Alright. Give me a sec. Okay. Welcome. So here we are back again Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Where are you, Mountain?
Yep. Mountain.
Do we have any of the time zones represented today? Do we have East Coast?
Central.
Central. Hey, Central. All right. All right, we'll see who else shows up. So, learning to pivot. Thanks for coming. Good to see you all. And I'm sure we'll see some other friendly faces. Jeffrey Winship, thank you for joining. You are a new guest in the room today.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Had some good chats over the last couple days on the Twitter sphere. So here we are. Oh, Sean Beaverson, here he comes. So here we are. We're going to learn to pivot as usual, and we're gonna try our best not to make fun of the word prodding today, but we're gonna do it anyway. Thanks to Verina's, I don't know. Let's see if she breaks 1,000 retweets with a typo that is really great. I will say this publicly. That's one of the best typos ever because it got into this whole idea of, well, can we, how can we prod learning? How could educators prod learning? You meant professional learning, right?
I did.
PROF. Yeah. But the F is so close to the D.
It is.
So I'm going to put that out there and prod all of us. Hi, Sean. Thanks for joining. New in the room. This is cool. And one of the things that I love what we're doing is trying to thanks to Verina's suggestion that we get back to some practical nuts and bolts things, and now that's really it's really become essential because there seems to be like an enormous number of articles and tweets written about, hey, how do you reopen your school, or how do you have summer school? Should you have summer school in person? And then a bunch of different things are coming around. They alternatively make me think differently or get me upset or start wondering about costs of, like really is one school really going to spend that much money to maybe be able to have kids in a physical space? Couldn't we spend the money in some other way and just be okay with, not showing up physically for a while? So those kinds of things get really practical for me and they kind of upset me. I try to stay calm. So I want to get your thoughts today and see if you have any questions to put out to the group about maybe and it doesn't have to be about reopening, but that does seem to be the hot button thing that's prodded into our minds these days. So what's on your mind? What kind of problems do you want to solve today, and what are you thinking about when it comes to opening or not opening brick and mortar school? I'm going to drop off into the hedges here. What do you think?
This is Michael Walker, secondary digital learning specialist in Edina. And Brian, those are the questions that we are asking right now, as long as we can get all the grades from this year taken care of. We've got folks in our district who are way down the road of wanting to have a schedule baked, and some who aren't even thinking about a schedule. They just want to make sure they get through this week, which is our final week, and get things happening. But we're looking at everything from knowing that we're going to have students who can't physically come back to school, and some staff who physically can't come back to school, whether because their own immune system or the immune system of someone they live with. But we also have lots of pressure because we have about 60% of our elementary families who prior to the pandemic had 2 jobs. And so that whole aspect of education, public education, that we are also a child care provider for a significant portion of the day. And how does that work? I was talking to a dad this morning who he's got a full-time job and he's trying to help his kids with distance learning, and it's the last week and he was really struggling with the process and that. And so trying to figure out something that is going to meet those needs is kind of there, but there's so many unknowns right now. And as far as what we will be allowed to do, what subjects will be able to come back, maybe vocal music might not be because of aspiration and stuff like that. So what does that all mean? And still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, Ehor, hello. Rose, hello. Feel free to jump in if you want to follow this thread, or soon we can tackle a new question or design problem.
Well, I would say that this is really tricky. I got invited to be on the task force for my school. We're an independent school. I'm Bob Irving, by the way, middle school computer science at an independent school in Charleston, South Carolina. And independent school heads and administrations have been working really hard on this. And I was very impressed with how our school and other schools are handling this. They're being very deliberate about it, very thoughtful, you know. And but it's really tricky. And I was actually trying to find this one thing that they shared out to us, and I can't, if I can find it, I'll share it. But we had somebody doing research on some schools that have already opened, one in Luxembourg and one in Denmark. And they had their pamphlet or brochure about exactly how this was going to go. And they were treating it very, very seriously. But, you know, you had to think along with that person at the cult of pedagogy, you know, is it, you know, it's going to be so different. I think that people are, especially I would think parents and students are wanting get something going. I mean, I don't know. And to me, the X factor is what's going to happen this summer. I mean, where I live, our state has kind of lifted pretty much all the restrictions, not all of them, but most of them. We live near a beach town, which was mobbed this weekend. I mean, 3 mile backup getting in, not a mask in sight, social distancing is, you know. So I see that, and, you know, I'm not hoping for this, but I'm wondering, are we going to have a June spike because of this? And what's that going to do to everybody's plans? So I think you have to, like they say, you have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But there's about 50 different gradations in between those two. And we have to be ready for kind of all of them. So I wish I had an answer. Nobody has an answer. And that's clear that nobody has an answer. We all have things that we want to have happen, but, you know, it's all up in the air. It's all up in the air. I mean, I'm actually one of those at-risk people in my school, and I teach computer science, which in my lab is a very high touch environment. I've got robots, keyboards, mice, monitors, Raspberry Pis, microbits, circuit playgrounds. And the thought of having 5 rotating groups of middle schoolers coming through my classroom every day, touching everything, I just can't see how that's going to happen. So I'm trying to figure out how to pivot my own classes completely online, no matter what happens with the school. And I'm toying with the idea. I'm actually taking notes right now of what can I do that's completely virtual. All of our students have iPads, so there's that. So I'm thinking of moving the whole thing into Minecraft. I don't know if that's going to work, but that's kind of where my thinking is right now. It could be possible. I mean, I spent a lot of time building up my computer science curriculum, which I think is fabulous and gives the kids all kinds of opportunities. But in the absence of that, you know, we'll have to make do with something else. But anyway, that's where I am with all this.
If
Hit
I
it,
can jump
Jeffrey.
in, Bob, you and I need to talk after this because I'm a design and tech teacher, grade 7 and 8. I have a full workshop. We have bandsaws, scroll saws, all sorts of power tools and things. In addition to the computer lab that you just talked about, everything that I do is high touch. And we were given very short notice in order to pivot to an online curriculum. And the ministry I'm in Toronto, Toronto District School Board's got about 247,000 students. It's the largest one in Canada. And the ministry basically said, first of all, cut off the marks don't matter, focus on English and math and you're done. They then expanded that to some other things. And so one of the things that I did was I explored how to do challenges. And so we're doing that sort of thing. So I'm thinking that the first thing that we have to do, and this is for pretty much everybody, not just my class, is that we have to consider how to do stuff online, how to do the blended learning, how to give the kids the tools to be able to participate in this. Because I don't know if anybody else is doing this, but when we're doing the online learning with the kids, the ones that are doing it, certainly some of them need some support, but what we've got is pretty much a binary situation. Some of the kids are just completely opting out. We're not reaching those kids. And in a physical classroom, we could reach them and we could help them to join. And I mean, you can do as many breakout groups that you want with online stuff, but you can't get in there and you can't force the kids to be able to do that. The piece that I'm considering is when we get back in, let's imagine that we do some sort of thing where they come every other day. So they're coming on a Monday and a Thursday and a Tuesday and a Friday, and then Wednesday is a planning time for the teachers to connect with the kids that aren't connecting. To do something like that, we've got to say, okay, look, this is what we're doing. Now you need to go and do your stuff and then come back, and then we're going to touch base. But we're going to give you some of the tools, like, for example, when you hand in virtual work, it's not finished. It's something that you have to continue to do. And it's just something that a lot of the schools haven't been doing. And certainly I'm somebody who has been more prepared to do some of the online stuff. But I'm getting as many phone calls and emails and things from teachers as I am from students, and saying, okay, look, how do we do this? Like, we want to do this, but how do we do this? And they're very frightened. They're frightened about just a straw poll of the parents that I had just yesterday. Half of them aren't going to send their kids back no matter what. They're saying, okay, I'm just going to hang back because you can deliver this stuff to me, and we're going to work with the kids. I'm not sure that they've thought through how they're going to do the homeschooling about when they're actually physically going to go back, and there's an equity issue there. But I think the difficult thing for me is being in an environment that Bob described, which is high touch. I'm not the only high touch place. Like somebody was talking about music. We have instrumental music, and they share instruments. So how do you do that? So it's difficult all around. But I'm here to say that Toronto doesn't have the answers either. We're working at it real hard, but we're experiencing the same things. You said that Charleston had beaches open. We were very sad. We opened up the parks, and then suddenly everybody lost their minds. So it's difficult everywhere.
Thanks for sharing that, Jeffrey. That's great. And Gary, welcome. Colleen, welcome. So let's keep puzzling through this, and maybe make sure, Verena, you can help me make sure some of our new guests get the microphone spotlight first. That'd be great.
Yes, so I'm Verena Roberts, or Dr. Verena Roberts, I forget. Some of the things that I'm challenged by, and so we could talk about, or you could give me some insight in. A school district in Alaska has contacted me, and this is going to put a totally different tweak on what we're talking about. So we've talked a lot about infrastructure and how we can support from different contexts with ed tech. But their goal is to rethink the way that they're leading education from an Indigenous lens. And they want to create a distributed model where they keep many of their teachers down south, and yet they lead with facilitators within the community. And they want to create a co-teaching, I know, they want, because they don't want their communities to get sick. And we know this from historical trauma, and we know this from other historical contexts, but they're literally like, we, in the next few months, we don't want them. We don't want people to make people, whoever they are, to make us sick. So that one I'm working on, and any help would be greatly appreciated. So, but I like the idea of that team model, because I think that also talks about parents possibly and teachers, or whoever, and teachers. I think that's a model that needs to be chatted about and discussed a little bit, because while I love it when I have great learning design that my son can go and do and he's highly engaged in, the reality is 10-year-olds aren't. And I still have to go in there and help. So there's differences with our elementary and all the way up. And there's also the big thing that I definitely learned about in Twitter on the weekend again and reinforced is, we're thinking about learning, but we're kind of forgetting about the human part of the kids too, and the trauma and the fear. You kind of mentioned it, Jeffrey. Like again, I'll use my 10-year-old. He doesn't want to go back to school because he's scared. Like it's we have to create safe learning spaces again. So I think that's where the Minecraft and the supportive and caring learning environments could really be an advantage, because that's a space that they've always felt safe in. So that's safe learning spaces is another one. But I know I'm going back in the fall officially as a high school humanities teacher, and I'm helping to redesign courses that are interdisciplinary to meet gaps, to try to save time for our high school students so they don't have to do everything. Again, like more competency based. So those things are all being talked about. I have absolutely no idea what's happening in terms of them coming in and scheduling, but that will all be a huge problem if I'm supposed to work at the same time. So I don't know how that's going to work. Any of those ideas on any of those would be great.
So hi, this is Rose Colby, and you mentioned competency-based. That's the world I live in, and have done quite a lot of design work around competency-based systems. So I think one of the things that really presses on my thinking is this is the opportunity for you to break through some of the traditional barriers that have been in place that have kept kids from being successful. So at this point, my best advice is, who are your kids as learners right now? And you describe them. You describe kids that have been totally disengaged. You describe kids that do better with person-to-person learning. You describe kids who do very well working independently online. So when they walk through the door on whatever date, whether it's some of them or all of them, you have to be prepared to meet them where they are on the day that they come in. So they aren't a third grader anymore. They're at a point in a learning progression. So what you really have to think about is, as they come through the door, kind of lifting up all of your academics up out of grade level, see it as a progression. Use teacher input, the formative assessments. Grades aren't going to get you the information that you need, but find out where the sweet spot is. Where is the kid at in their learning? If a kid is a sixth grader but hasn't engaged in school for a year, his skill set may be down at the continuum of learning, a skill set at the third grade level. Well, that's where he's going to engage in, right? And math may be different for them. So you kind of take the curriculum up out of grade level, find out where the kid is at, and then design your system to pivot on a dime, so that, yeah, all right, with COVID, you may be limited on how many kids are going to walk through the door. All right, well, how would that need then translate into a design for learning that would accommodate these learners? Okay, who are the kids that don't want to come to school? And the parents don't. Educators can't make these decisions. You got to have the parents in the room to make the decisions. So you need your policymakers, then you need your parents, then you need the experts in the room, the teachers. But someone has to advocate for where the kids are in their learning. And this is the point in time where you can start designing new systems for both teaching and learning that will meet the needs of kids. I was working with a district in Michigan last week, and their approach was we're educating a family. We're not educating individual students. And that's where the big aha for teachers came, when the teachers wanted to just take their daily schedule and put it online and expect the kids to sit there all day and learn it the way the teacher would deliver it. And families didn't have devices to do it that way. They didn't have parents that could support it. I mean, all of the reasons why, you have parents who, not just the technical skills, but the literacy skills to support kids. You can't punish kids if we're expecting them to learn at home and they don't have the support for learning. So who are your kids, and what are the types of community supports? Start using some community facilities when you can't use all your school facilities. Start thinking outside of that box of traditional delivery of instruction that you've been doing for years and never questioned, and are now expecting it to solve your problem right now. It's not going to. It's not going to. And I always use the notion of time, technology, resources, and talent. You may not be using your teachers at the grade levels that you're using them now, because your kids may come in and out at different times. They may need coaching on some days. They may need an assessor coach at another time to look over assessment work. You may want to take your interdisciplinary work or some of your tech work and be partnering with science teachers to deliver science curriculum. Use your talent differently than you've been thinking of it in terms of one teacher deployed to 24 kids. How would a teacher handle grouping kids? And it's easier to group kids. It's a whole lot easier to group kids online than it is physically in a school, when you're capturing assessment data and said, yeah, we've got a group of kids clustered at this part of a learning progression. Maybe it's from MAPS testing or IXL testing or whatever. You can identify who the kids are. It doesn't make any difference what grade level they're in or what teacher they're assigned to, but now you've got a teacher that you can deploy to a group of kids for a short period of time or for a longer period of time. So you just have to, we're at the point where you don't have any answers now, but this could be a big breakthrough moment for you as you look at redesigning your system to meet student needs primarily. And as long as you put that out to say, we're designed to meet our students' needs, families, tell us what these needs are. What are the barriers that you faced? What are the things that would work for you? Well, you're going to get a plethora of different ideas and design around that. You may come up with 4 main design modes around that you're not even thinking of now. Right now, as teachers, you're thinking of delivering your curriculum in a different way. And systemically, that won't work for you. You've got to think big systems, and thrown in all the COVID stuff that you have to deal with, high touch areas. No one put plexiglass up around the desk. So now you're going to have to distance them 6 feet apart, and all of these things are all going to happen to you. And you've got to have, enough, I call it that resiliency, be resilient thinkers, be flexible thinkers, and think through flexible systems that all of a sudden, just like it happened last time, may happen again. You described some of the events that may cause it to happen. All of a sudden, it's going to change on a dime. All of a sudden, tomorrow, they can't come to school. And the system should be able to just click in a different gear and work for you. So that's, I know that, using competencies versus standards is much more helpful. You can do a lot more interdisciplinary work when you're looking at really deep learning. That's application of content and skills, where they can access content anywhere. They don't have to have teachers deliver it the way they used to. Using playlists. I mean, it's just such a rich, a lot of resources to do that now. And a lot of teachers don't know how to do that. But once you start pooling the professional understanding and knowledge base, teachers are learners. They can learn, and there may be a different learning curve for teachers at different points. So just some thoughts I wanted to share with the group. I know
Those are great.
You're interested in some of those
Yeah.
things.
Thanks, Rose.
And welcome, Daniel. Thanks for joining us. And So, yeah, Rose, you're pushing on a lot of good things there that I think that we could consider as well. Everybody's got notes, and I was never the student who took notes in class. I'm still not that student, and yeah, I guess it's almost as though we're focusing too much on like the actual details of what to do,
Mhm.
and and so much of what we're reading about and chatting about seems to be about like how other places are doing things that we could consider. And to your point, I see very little. I mean, maybe it's happening, but I don't hear people talking about it or writing about it very often. Like, how are we actually teaching ourselves in the context of the students that we serve and the
Mhm.
families that we serve? Like, where is that? That because I'm sure it's happening, but we're not really. Maybe we're just too deep in it. Maybe we're not able to highlight and articulate that kind of work right now. But I think that would really be helpful for teachers to be reading about how other people are actually doing that part
Mm.
rather than importing a solution from elsewhere.
Right. Although I think the situation now is so unique. Like a lot of the school redesign work I've been involved with have been in schools that have gone into utter failure. They've tried everything to fix the traditional model and they finally just threw it out the window. And we started with new approaches, right? And this is very different because as much as you may make some changes, there may be other barriers and things out of your control that you still don't know about yet, you know? So it's uniquely challenging, that's for sure.
So this is I'm Sean from
Jump in.
Edina as well, and so here's sort of what I've been thinking over this past weekend after having a conversation with somebody who was looking at schedule differently, and then I talked about using competency-based models to help redefine what the schedule might look like, and I got the pushback of if we were starting from scratch, we could do that, and so that adjutant got me started to think like, okay, so here's someone who I think is out on the edge right now, really trying to think creatively about some solutions for the fall. And then when I presented one that just seems a little bit further out, it's the idea that if we were starting from scratch, perhaps we could.
Right.
And so what that really made me think about is the emergency situation that we're in and the reality of an emergency situation, and that we're still all under stress, right? My bride has been up in the bed for 2 days and just got her COVID test. So we don't know what's going on, but she doesn't feel well. And so rather than having that solution in place, what I started to think about is it really is the 2021 school year is where we have the 2020 school year to put these research projects in place to make a case for doing things differently in small and
Mhm.
actionable ways. Because in order to get the full level change, you have to get to the school board and you have to have policies changed. I mean, if we want to get real serious about changing things, that's changing board policies. That's making different budget considerations. And really, practically speaking, with a 9-month on and a 3-month off system, we're at the end of one emergency, planning for the beginning of another emergency. So I started to think like, okay, well, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I want to get to this thing where school really does look fundamentally different. When could that practically happen? And that's what started me thinking around the 2021 model and what are the questions, what are the things that we could put into place, what is the demonstrations that we could do over this next school year to help demystify these things for the public, to help demystify these things for families. And the one thing that you said, Rose, that I think is coming out and I think is essential and probably something I still haven't figured out or talked about enough yet is that family connection. What are we doing to support families through this? What could we do better to support families through this? How can we guide our work towards the family? This is an incredible opportunity for us to educate broadly across. I mean, everybody's experiencing this disruption together. And so here's a chance for us as professional educators to take that message and get it into the family's hands, and then look at this next year as a lab year. What are we going to do? How do we care for the humans, those little children that we serve, as best we can during this next year? And then we start to let's look at how we can use some of the best things that we've been wanting to get done forever as little touch points throughout the year. And then I said on Twitter, you got 10 months. You got 10 months because the board policy discussions are going to start in December. So if you really want to get these changes in place, you're looking at December, January. I mean, at least in Minnesota for my district. If you really want to get some fundamental changes, then you got to get to the policy, and that's your policy timeline. That was my thought.
That's great. Daniel, Colleen, you want to jump in?
I feel like an outlier here. I'm retired here comfortably in Venice, enjoying the warm weather and not having to deal with the problems that you folks are dealing with. And it's very sad. You know, it's very sad. But I see it as anytime you're really sad, that's a huge opportunity for something new to develop. You know, I just sent an email off to somebody that was looking for math lessons. And I said, well, I've been developing them for years. I'd like to share it with you. And he says, no, I don't think you have the right kind of materials. So I was like shut down, you know. So I said, I couldn't believe it, you know, after 25 years of working on this stuff, you think it would be worthwhile for someone to at least post it somewhere other than me myself doing it. So my issues are smaller, but at the same time, I can step back and think about some of the things like we were talking about, Brian, you know, working on some projects together. I don't know if they solve things right now, but certainly it's something to get your mind off these issues and move on to something a little more positive.
That's true. I mean, I do think that we all have a great role to play in modeling for children that we still do interesting things. We haven't given up our creative and intellectual lives for this.
If I could jump in a little bit, first to say thank you for inviting me to join you. I recognize Susan going back to our ET MOOC about 7 years ago. I've come to this conversation from the non-school hour perspective and from a volunteer perspective for many years. And so I've always had a different kind of flexibility than you do in classrooms in terms of what we could try to do to reach kids, inspire kids, help kids, then you know, really we were never limited by anything other than our own willingness to put the time in and look for ideas. It's really kind of interesting that while I led a non-school program for almost 35 years, I've had more interaction with educators over the last 7 years through the online community of CL MOOC and ET MOOC than I ever did before. The ability to have conversation with classroom teachers, with principals in the Chicago system, and probably other systems too. If you're on the outside, that's really tough. And yet in this online type of community, over many years, we've developed some pretty good relationships. I've been I've approached this from a systems thinking perspective. When we started a group back in 1993, we asked one question. We said, what are all the things we need to know and do to assure that every kid living in, or born in poverty today is starting a job and a career by age 25? And if you started out with asking that question and aggregating links to information related to that question, sort of like blueprints that recognize different things that need to be done in different ways at different times, over a period of years, that could become a pretty sizable library of all we need to think and do. And that's what I've been trying to build, and tried to encourage other people to do the same or to draw from it. So I posted a message over in the chat a few minutes ago and said, as we're talking about all of this, this is a huge crisis, a huge challenge. Are the non-school people, other people who already have contact with your students, other than their parents, are they in the conversation as well? You know, there may be other people in your community who have touches with your students that you don't know about or you're not in conversation with. And frankly, they're having the same challenges right now. The non-school programs that were site-based, where kids came to the program once a week, twice a week, every day, they don't have that contact either. And many of them are pivoting online. And if I maintain a list of Chicago programs, so I got about 200 programs in a library, and I follow them on Facebook and I follow them on LinkedIn. So on any given day, I can be looking at what they're showing that they're doing. And you see a wide range of activities and potential solutions that if you're looking at those things, then some of them might be inspirations for what other people might do in different places.
Right, that's great. That's a good point to. We do need, yeah. I mean, I guess you're. Earlier, I was saying that like I'm a little overwhelmed and almost like don't tell me any more ideas. Like when I see solutions in other places, but it is interesting that you know that kind of protective, sheltered view maybe does make it so that I can't see things that I actually care about and just don't know about. That's why I like that we keep doing this weekly to keep pushing on that. And helping each other see things too. I want to make sure that Colleen gets a chance to talk.
Hi. Hi. I'm really excited to join, but this is all kind of new to me. Prior to the pandemic, I didn't use Twitter at all and haven't joined any kind of online discussions yet. But Twitter has been amazing, actually. I ventured in as I needed to learn more about the virus. So I'm a high school teacher in a big school in Calgary, Alberta. And so interacting with lots of kids. And I think right before schools were shut, it was possibly in our school, but you never know for sure. And then our daughter is 8. And she's an exceptional learner and also has rheumatoid arthritis. So highly motivated to learn lots. And so through this like intense learning and trying to figure out how to manage our risk, stumbled into an area that interested me, although I didn't explore it very deeply, but years ago, I don't even know, 15 years ago, maybe, I briefly looked at a master's degree in systems thinking or systems design. And then have recently come across like complexity theory and risk management in relation to the pandemic. And I've been curious to find out like more about it and how it overlaps with education. And at the same time, now I'm starting to read more about what's happening in education. And I'm sort of an atypical teacher in that right out of school, I graduated in 97, 98. I went overseas and just taught English for 4 years, came back and worked in a private school for a year, but then I left and was working in marketing for 10 years and then have just been venturing back in. So I'm still kind of a rookie teacher. But part of what brought me back into teaching was that education in Alberta was changing. And so inquiry was taking off and they've set up new high schools. There's called this high school redesign program. So I'm now working in one of these high schools. And in a high school that's very focused on wellness and community and connection of relationships between the students and teachers. And so it's like, you know, in other high schools that, you know, you're sort of siloed in your department and teachers aren't talking across departments. It's not like that in our school at all. So if I was to be in any place right now, venturing into the fall, I'm in a perfect spot and there's brilliant, sensitive teachers who are wanting change. But so I'm sort of like, I'm not coming into this with depth of experience, but wondering how like systems thinking and that kind of complexity and will help us set up something better. And I loved what I'm sorry, I don't know her name, who spoke earlier about like it's an opportunity to break through some of the barriers on traditional thinking. And I mean, I'm still doing lots of that traditional stuff because I'm still learning how to teach, but that's where I'm heading. And that's what I believe in, is this more flexible learning. My daughter is gifted, and I worked in a school briefly, not briefly, 3 years, but as a substitute teacher for gifted students. And then she has ADHD, and I found out recently I have it too. So I always have a heart for those kids who haven't traditionally fit and haven't been served very well. And I'm like, it excites me actually to see all of some of that inhibiting structure or lack of structure or lack of attention. Like it's been such an automated factory producing kids at 12 years that like I'm craving breaking some of that down and going deeper with the kids and giving them liberty, or having the chance to go deeper to support the kids that we need it. And so like from my perspective, I'm just trying to connect to how change is happening and hoping that change actually will happen and last.
Thank
great.
you so much for bringing that up, Colleen, though, and taking the risk to come in here and doing something so different as well. Like
I feel like an outlier too.
Yeah, we're all outliers. We are like we know some things that are similar, but yeah. But I really appreciate that, because in that tweet that went crazy on the weekend, it was really neat to see everyone's perspectives, that everyone is coming to this possibility, like you're saying, Gary, that we and Sean, actually, that we really need to rethink this. Like,
yeah.
Although I'm scared of saying start over, that
Yeah.
is not what I want, but I am really getting the idea that a lot of people, a lot of parents, a lot of community members, not just teachers, like need to think about things differently, and the whole learning to pivot, like we've been talking about. And while Brian and I and Susan and Michael and I think Rob, we were there from the beginning saying we could have done this on day one.
Yeah.
I'm excited and scared to hear that there's more momentum now. So how do we deal with that and lead that? And I think that's what, Gary, you're getting at. Like, how are we going to lead it when we haven't heard the tinklings and the grassroots saying, yeah, we want to do something differently?
I'll jump in. I've been different than everyone else in that I was Susan Spellman-Camp from Calgary, Alberta, and I was retired and had to pivot in the last 3 weeks. So I got hired again as a high school counselor. So I had to kind of go in almost fresh. Which was good, because I probably had more energy than most people because I've been off. And so I was looking at things with a fresh eye and a fresh mind, and I was excited. And I knew that what I was about to do was just about connecting with kids on a social emotional level. And so for me, that's what I love to do. And fortunately, I thought about this a lot, that I wouldn't have been able to pivot in had I not had the technology skills that I have. There would have been no way for me to pivot in and know how to do it, what to do, how to make those connections, how to make them quickly, because I sent out a SMORE about me and introduced myself in a very quick way, because I've been retired from that particular high school for 3 years. So the kids didn't know me. I am a stranger. And so how was I able in 3 weeks to make some real connections and do something that was helpful? So I did that many ways technologically, by meeting them on Google Meet, by sending out some Google Forms that ask them about them, tell me more about you, sending some virtual check-ins, sending out positive things each day, whether it was a message or a note, involving parents more than I ever had. So I wrote a letter to the parents, thanking them for all the things that they were doing, offering that they could engage with me very quickly if they wanted to, that we're a team, we're in this together. I know that's a cliche, but we really are. And so how can we do some things that are helpful in this period of time that I am here to really focus on helping your child, your son or daughter? And so it was, I think it lends itself to how do we start over, and how do we make, because you've all talked about it, whether you go back virtually or non-virtually, whatever happens. I mean, it's going, virtual is not going away. It's just not going away. So how do you use what you can face to face? How do you use that virtually? And the good news is that the research shows that making this connection face to face is valid. There's over 20 years of research to show that, you know, in the counseling field anyway, in the psychological field, that that doing telepsychology works. And yes, you might be missing things, but I think you have to look at what you are doing and can you engage kids? And there are so many ways. There was a young girl who didn't want, she didn't know me, so she didn't want to see me, you know, come on a Google Meet. And I said to her, she didn't want to show her face. So I was talking to this little, you know, this ball. And I said to her, it's okay. Do you want to try, you know, talking to me face to face? And she said, well, I don't look very good. And I said, well, neither do I. So it really doesn't matter. So let's just try. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. But again, finding those ways to connect and build those connections and maintain those connections. And what I know is that we all of us here, whichever way we're dealing with youth, this is a time they will never, ever, ever forget in their lives. So everything you say, everything you do matters. And I take that very seriously. And I think about that every time I'm engaging with youth. I know the learning will come if we do that. And we've all heard that. I mean, that's been oversaid, overdone, but it can't be understated how powerful just getting those connections. And if that takes 3 weeks to a month, so be it. So be it. The kids are still learning. They're still doing things that are going to connect in that brain and make them want to learn. And you have an opportunity by sending out a Google form to find out, what are they looking forward to? What do they want to learn? And the kids that I talk to are saying things like they're looking forward to next year's flexibility. They're looking, I mean, it's not all bad. We think it's all bad, but it's not all bad when you talk to the kids. They're not all stressed out. Some of them are having a very good time. It's certainly those that are struggling that we super are concerned about, and so we should be. But there's a lot of kids who are doing well and quite successful when you talk to them about, how is this for you? What's your strengths? How is this working for you? And why is it working for you? So anyway, I've been very fortunate to have pivoted in this short time and feel very grateful, because it's given me the opportunity to test out some things that I otherwise would not have had the opportunity to do to engage with kids.
That's great. Yeah, you know what, you're pushing on a lot of things here that the chat's very active in today's session too, with like looking at starting over, starting from scratch, making lists of things to go. You know, how would you, you know, what are the real essentials to start a school if you wanted to start a school today? And Susan, what you're talking about would have to be right there, you know, as important as anything else, you know, in the starting of a school. And it is interesting because, you know, like because we can be keyboard warriors or camera warriors, you know, from our little silos here, it's incredibly tempting sometimes and super easy to just, you know, rattle off whatever you want to rattle off. And, you know, and you probably, you know, even if you're, you know, flexible, I'll say, or long-tongued, you know, in the classroom, you know, you might you might be even more so in this setting. And there is a danger. Not only could you be recorded and parents hear you and things that you don't necessarily want them to, like maybe you don't get your sense of humor or whatever it is, but I think to what you're saying is like there's actually a greater impact than we might be aware of the kinds of words that we're using and the feelings that those words generate for the kids when they hit their inner ear, and they think about it later. Hey, yeah, what did he say? What did she say? Oh my gosh! And that's a good reminder. I appreciate that.
Well, and also as an online teacher, I had to do my certification online, and I will never forget the moment when the principal and the superintendent were like, this is the first time we have seen so much data and analysis to support what you're actually doing. It was out there. Now, on the other hand, if I wasn't doing a very good job, it was also out there. So that is what we're getting at too. And that's what you're talking about too, Susan, that confidence building for teachers and students, and knowing that making their thinking and learning visible is really scary. I am so sorry, but I have to go because my son is not, as you said, a dependent online learner. I like that wording we used today. And he's maybe too dependent. So thank you.
Go prod some learning, Verena.
Uh-huh.
So we'll wave goodbye to Verena and maybe kind of wrap things up a little bit here as we approach 2:00. So what else is lingering? I know, let's see, I don't think Gary had a chance to talk, although he's talking in the chat. And I want to make sure you get a chance to speak, Gary, if you'd like to. Declining the microphone.
No, I've just been typing some things. I don't have much to say.
Gotcha. No worries. So what about like thinking where, let's look at where we might just toss out a couple questions or problems as we wrap things up here for what we could consider in this upcoming week and getting into wherever this might take us, and then come back again in a week. So what's on your mind right now? Jeffrey, what's up?
How do we do more with less? How much curriculum can we cut? Because I think we need to ask rich questions. It's like math. You ask a rich math question, you don't have to ask 50. And how do we communicate that to parents, that it, like math, it evolves and it changes. So here's something that they don't feel as comfortable and connected with, and their kids are doing this stuff all the time. Oh, they know about computers. Well, they have a broad but shallow understanding of computers and computer technology and all the codes and conventions that come with this kind of media text. So they don't know some of those things. And so we've all been in that situation where a short phone call will clear things up, but a long email, it just goes on and on. So I think that that we have to look at curriculum and say, what can we throw out? Because we're not going to get to it all. We really aren't. And so if you're going to give kids inquiry projects, if you're going to give them voice and choice, if you're going to give them all of those things, something has to go. It means that if you design it well, things can do double duty. So you make a rich problem, and the English teacher can jump in, and you can look at that from different lenses in order to find out what the student knows. Like, how do you demonstrate that? I mean, we have all sorts of opportunities. If we're going to use digital, why are we asking for it in writing? How? Tell me how you're feeling. Send me a GIF. Do something on TikTok. Whatever you're going to do, show me that you've mastered the art of communication, and please don't limit it to what we did in the 1950s or 60s or so.
Those are cool thoughts. I like that. And I was reading in the chat just now, which I'm a little behind, and Colleen, you mentioned outcomes, which is maybe another thing we could bring into our thinking for the next week and come back to, along with this, cutting, wherever the cutting might be, the more is less, less is more, or more is less. But outcomes, yeah, that's a big one too. I mean, whether or not you've been a fan of outcomes all along, or this is just sort of changing, like, well, how do we get there? Yeah, that's a really good one. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more where your thinking is on that?
As an English teacher, marking, I don't even know like how many essays, 140 essays at a shot is such a complex task. And there's brilliant people who've worked in our department have designed these rubrics that are amazing, and they're used in, I don't know, some international consortium. And as teachers, I think like we have the ability to plan the heck out of things, and I can get very complex and detailed. But the things I kind of keep, I don't know, like I just sort of grab onto things that are interesting for me, but like complexity theory, complex adaptive systems. I know what Sean Michael Morris says, like he doesn't know what his outcomes will be until he knows his students. And knowing your students has got to come first, and it hasn't in the past. It's been our agenda and the curriculum and the factory, and that's what I want to see flip. The other thing that like not everybody reacts very well to him, but is Sugata Mitra, who has the SOUL program, and he's a physicist, so like it connects again. Like I'm not a math person at all, so I know someone had asked if I have any mind maps or some kind, and I have nothing because I'm just like interested in only starting to venture into it. But he honors learning as a self-emergent phenomenon, and I think like my time teaching, I taught in Taiwan for 4 years and just teaching ESL and various levels, but because there was no like pressing curriculum and all this structure, kids learn, they just learn. And it was like they taught themselves how to speak English. And I mean, I for sure was doing that, right? But you let it breathe more and give them space. And so that's the stuff that just really, excites me. And now I'm hearing like the learning leaders, not all of them, but I know 2 in English are in these meetings now, and they're redesigning the outcomes for the fall to be appropriate for online learning. And that's good, and I'm glad about it, but I'm hoping that it's going to start to let that breathing space happen, and recognizing that it depends on the kids that you've got.
Yeah, that's great. Gary, your buddy Sugata Mitra.
Yeah, like I said, I'll the video from my conversation with him last week will be online soon, so watch Twitter. But if people are looking for something practical to do, I'm going to bum you out and give you a 2-step homework assignment. The first one is get a copy of your local school budget, either where your kids attend or the district you live in. Request a copy of it. It's they legally have to provide it. If it's pamphlet size, ask them for the real one. And you need to read it. And the reason you need to read it is because despite the fact that our colleague from Minnesota talked about the laborious policy making and policy changing cycle in Minnesota, we're going to need to react to some crises soon. And I would suggest that you need to get a hold of the budget, and you need to come up with a narrative, an answer for how we cut 10% or 20% or 30% of it. Because otherwise you're going to wake up on a Tuesday morning and read that the school board the night before did it in some ham-fisted, ugly way. And I think we're going to have some real periods of strife coming up, and we need to take a leadership role in determining which things we think matter and which things we value, and being able to do the work for some folks who are going to be up against it pretty quickly about making drastic cuts. I mean, I used to make my pre-service teachers get a copy of the budget. It blows people's minds when you actually see what schools are spending their money on.
Right.
And what they're not spending
budget alone. Yeah.
What?
The croissant budget is crazy.
Well, ed tech, spending $300,000 to take attendance every year.
I know.
Maybe you could do that with index cards. Maybe it's not, maybe, but, or we used to find, there was budget lines for dry cleaning football uniforms, but only football. Everyone else gets dirty uniforms. you know, and things like that. But that's just the picayune stuff. The problem is probably 80% of a public school budget is personnel
Right.
costs.
Right.
So you want to know what's going to happen. Some people are going to lose their jobs, and then we're going to have to decide what stays and what goes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree that we should get as far ahead of this as we possibly can. I mean, like that, in part, that is what we're why I reached out to virtual strangers to become colleagues on Twitter and start doing this so we can, you know, however this gains momentum, it goes somewhere good.
I posted a comment in the chat saying, does this group have a Google map that shows where each person lives and teaches?
No.
Without that,
we could make one.
Well, and it would be a good thing to do, because without the map, the things that, like the budgeting conversation, that's really important. But are we talking about people in affluent districts doing that? What about the people in poor districts? You know,
right.
What about the kids that don't have access to technology themselves?
Right.
You know,
so I think we're gonna have to think locally. I think these conversations, we're not gonna be able to think globally about some of this stuff. You're gonna have to react locally. You're gonna have to say, you know, you're gonna have to deal with your own lifeboat.
Well, and that works for those who have the capacity to do that, and it doesn't work for those who don't. And
true.
So if this conversation is intended to be locally driven, and that's good. But if it's purporting to talk about what's happening for everyone, then it would be significant to know who's in the conversation and who's missing.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, by design, we're totally open here. And so, you know, we sometimes go way out into the abstract ideas and then other times bring it back down to, you know, real nuts and bolts things. So we welcome everyone and all points of view and all questions. If you want to take your design problem that's happening locally, bring it to us. We'll help you figure it out. If you want to have us read a 30-page article and talk about the big stuff, we'll do that too. What's up, Jeffrey?
I just have a question about policy and curriculum, just the way that some people were talking about just changes. From an Ontario perspective, it all is top down. It's all ministry down. It's not a school board. The school board can't change what the curriculum is. Every school has to follow what everybody in Ontario does. And I sort of assumed that was the case, but I'm just kind of thinking that listening to people now, perhaps your boards have more control than ours do?
It's dramatically different from state to state.
Okay.
There are some states like Florida that are more top down than other states, like New Jersey, which has 630 school districts that independently set curriculum.
Wide variety of problems there. So, okay, well, how shall we end? Should we just, you know, to be continued. We'll be here next week. You all get invited, whether or not you want to be. I'm going to send you an invite. And I think I have everybody. Colleen, I want to make sure I have you on Twitter. For some reason, I can't. I don't know why. But if you could.
We have a direct message. You DM'd me.
We did? Okay, good.
Yep.
Okay, all right. I'll just put that in there just in case.
That was something I learned today, how to do direct messages.
Yeah.
It's
important.
Dude.
Otherwise, you tell everybody what you really think.
I'm a Twitter novice, actually.
And Ehor, say off Charlemagne the God, too.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, well, this is terrific. And so we've got our homework. We know we're thinking about some big stuff over the next week, and then let's bring back some new questions and problems. And if you have any ideas for articles to read, books to read, please send them my way, and we'll try to also organize that way. I hope the chat saves. I took a couple screenshots just in case, because there was some good stuff in there. You might want to do the same. And I guess that's probably it. How about some outro music? Shall we have a little outro music?
Ihor, I sent you a number to FaceTime me.
Okay, I haven't FaceTime, so I'm have to make it up.
Thanks a
you'll
lot
figure
for
it out.
the conversation. Enjoyed it.
Thanks for coming. This is I love that we're growing. It's important that we keep growing.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Take it easy. I'll figure out how to save the chat notes somehow.
They download if you're recording.
Don't,
Yeah,
it's
they
all-
should. Let me make sure. I'll stop the stream.